Namaste. Welcome to this module on Socrates. We have seen life history of Socrates and his unique method of questioning in the last part. Let us talk about his concept about human wisdom in this part. Though Socrates' method of inquiry was criticized, scholars found few amazing thoughts about human behavior, human mind, ignorance and human wisdom in these dialogues. For example, as per Plato's Apology, in the defense speech, Socrates said that human wisdom begins with recognition of one's own ignorance. The unexamined life is not worth living. Ethics and ethical virtues are the only thing that matter. Socrates says a good human being cannot be harmed. Here, a good human being is a human being with ethical virtues. So, whatever misfortunes a good person may suffer, that is poverty, illnesses, injuries, death of loved ones and so on, but his virtues remain intact. Isn't it very deep thought about human life? We see this concept is portrayed often in movies and dramas. A person of principles and he or she devotes his life or her life to live these principles. Though the person suffers a lot in this life, but his or her goodness remains intact. It is not easy, but such people are there in this world. It is amazing to know that such concepts are present from ancient time in the world. There are few more of such thoughts about human life and wisdom of Socrates. Socrates used to generate thought-provoking discussions to see if the people really knew what they were really talking about. Most of these discussions are like questioning people and then exposing the oddness of their statements. Socrates in this way presented few truths about human life and human wisdom. Let us discuss them one by one. Socrates says, I know that I know nothing. It is about human ignorance. He wanted people to reflect and come out of ignorance, opening up new ideas and challenging existing common knowledge. He believed that everything is objectionable and wisdom is not accepting knowledge as it is. We must keep reviewing what is already known to build another more solid knowledge. So, the only truth about wisdom is that we all should know that we know nothing. Isn't it interesting? Socrates once said that human science is more about destroying errors than discovering truths. It means we people do things with lots of trial and errors and we feel that finding out correct ways of living is everything, but it is not. Socrates says that the purpose of the science should be to understand the real purpose of the world. Why things are there as they are? Socrates says that the highest level of knowledge is contemplation. We have to review the things again and again. Wondering, becoming curious is the beginning of wisdom. We should not take anything for granted. We have to question everything, that is why it is happening. When we begin to question everything we have taken for granted, then our perception of the world changes. Hence, Socrates says that a life without examination does not deserve to be lived. It means we have to be critical not only about the world around us and the knowledge, but we have to be critical about ourselves. Criticizing is growing in true sense. The ultimate goal of life should be to become the best person, and we can't be best if we don't introspect. Though Socrates developed his method of inquiry, he said that everyone has to learn it on his own. Socrates never called himself a teacher, but he always said that I cannot teach a person to be curious, but though my questioning I can make people think about it. However, Socrates is painfully aware that his insights into these matters leave many of the most important ethical questions unanswered. It is left to his student Plato, using the Socratic method as a starting point and ranging over subjects that Socrates neglected, to offer positive answers to these questions. Now, let us see Socrates' questions and virtues and happiness. Like Aristotle and Plato, Socrates has also thought about virtues and happiness. The difference in their concept is methodology. Socrates, with this method of inquiry, also asked questions about human life, its purpose and ethics. He was the first in Greek history to talk on moral psychology. However, his probing questions converted various concepts of morality into ethical concepts. Socrates always asked, "How should I live?" But this question was not straight. He often used to pose questions to find or define virtues. His dialogue starts with the question, for example, about happiness is like, who is happy and who is not? To understand this, we need to understand the expected meaning of this term virtue or happiness in that period. And clarity about these concepts is necessary for understanding much else about Socrates and Plato's moral psychology besides. The concept is crucial, or ethics and moral psychology, because the question of how to live is equivalent to the question that what sort of life would enable one to attain or constitute happiness. And here intelligibility of the action is at the central point. Intelligibility means in a way to acquire virtues for being a good human being. In a way, or in simple terms, question of how to live is the question of how to act. Now, how I act depends upon what sort of person I am, and what sort of person means the qualities of my character, and the qualities of character, whatever they are manifested in actions and that add up to the best human life. The best human life is simply the life of virtues. Now, here Socrates believes that if I know what the virtues are and if I can define them, and then I will necessarily act in accordance with them. If consistently I behave according to real meaning of virtues, I will get a best life. So, the happy man and the virtuous man are the one and the same. Now, what is Socrates' intellectualism? In Apology, Plato has mentioned that Socrates says that the knowledge that constitutes virtue is unattainable by human beings, but he insists that the most important task for any human being is the attempt to attain it. But this approach was widely criticized. Knowledge is not only a thought, but some affective and appetitive side of human being is also attached to it, because if one has to act well, he has to believe that he should be best. One more criticism is Socrates thought about knowledge cannot explain failures or cognitive deficiencies. A stubborn actions, for example, in which one knowingly acts against one's own interest, he or she has knowingly chosen to be worse out of desire for pain or desire for pleasure. But in spite of such criticism, Socrates really thinks that one's prospects for happiness depend on one's purely intellectual accomplishments. Socrates' method of questioning also reveals his concept of soul. In Plato's dialogues, Phaedo, we find Socrates' concept of soul. In an argument, a speaker says that a soul is mortal. After the death of body, it is no longer exist anywhere, but that it is destroyed and dissolved on the day the man dies. Socrates here probes a question. Haven't you realized that our soul is immortal and never destroyed? The speaker asks the further question whether the soul, if it does have some form of existence after the person has died still possess some power and wisdom? Socrates says not only that soul is immortal, but it is not related to power, but related to the truth of life. And so, the soul contemplates truths after its separation from the body at the time of death. For Socrates, reality is dualistic, made up of two dichotomous realms. One realm is changeable, transient and imperfect, whereas the other realm is unchanging, eternal and immortal. The physical world in which we live, comprising all that we can see, hear, taste, smell and feel, belongs to the former realm. All aspects of our physical world are continually changing and transforming and disappearing. In contrast, the unchanging, eternal, perfect realm includes the intellectual essences of the universe, concepts such as truth, goodness and beauty. We find examples of these ideal forms in the physical world. For example, we might describe someone as truthful, good or beautiful, but these examples are always imperfect and limited. It is only the ideal form themselves that are perfect, unchanging and eternal. Socrates also talks about caring for souls. He says, if the head and the body are to be well, you must begin by curing the soul. That is the first and essential thing. And the care of the soul has to be effected by the use of certain charms, and these charms are fair words, and by them temperance is implanted in the soul. And where temperance comes and stays, their health is speedily imparted, not only to the head, but to the whole body. It means a healthy human being is the product of good values and virtues. Socratic philosophy was one of the practicality. He used to wander the streets of Athens, talking to people, asking the questions and challenging the beliefs they held about themselves. He did so because he believed that we are all responsible for looking after the state of out of soul or mind. It is for each individual to make sure his mental health is looked after and cared for. In the same way, we look after our bodies or properties. Socrates saw that many men and women gave priority to their reputation, wealth, property and status rather than caring first for the soul. As a result, he challenged the people of Athens, promoting his philosophy and the importance of virtue over vice, character over wealth and above all the question of one's beliefs. Socrates in this way was proved to be one of the most famous figures in the world history. His contribution provided the foundation for all of Western philosophy. He was thus considered as father of Western philosophy. Now, do you agree with this? Take a paper and pen and write down the concepts you studied in this module, which you feel make Socrates the great philosopher. Here are some options.